how can we make sure we've got consistency within our scripts? Well, today I'm giving you my top 5 tips of how to make sure that you've got consistency within your stories. Okay, my name is James Martin and welcome to Think Like a Writer. So tip number 1 is setting ground rules. So before you get started, what are the rules that you want to put in place? It could be anything from what are characters' momentums, what is happening in the universe, how is the wording, how is the style, how are the scenes going to play out, what are the ground rules? Okay, what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, and just giving yourself an idea of what are some of the ways that you really want to make sure if this happens, nothing changes, this happens again, again. Okay, and just making sure that when you set those ground rules that you stay in place. Okay, tip number 2, when you're talking about consistency with your characters, what are their habits? Now usually these are developed over time. As you know, what a habit is developed, it's when you do an action consistently again. Okay, so what are your characters' habits, and making sure that stays consistent as well. Tip number 3 is about the culture that your characters live in. If this is a real world type culture, you may have to do a bit of research. So if they're in your local neighborhood, what's the culture of that neighborhood? If your characters are going to be somewhere else that you've never been to, do some research. How do those people usually react, right? If your character is going to take place in another world, in another country, particularly when the culture is very different from what you're used to, you really need to do some research. How do those characters, how do those people, tribes, cultures, countries, government, how do they usually deal with their own country? What is that culture? Tip number 4, and I've mentioned this before in my episode regarding about characters, how to develop good characters, and that is their background. So your character's background, what have they been taught since the get-go? Usually, maybe your characters have parents. So what do those parents teach your kids? It's going to affect their beliefs, it's going to affect their habits, it's going to affect their fears, it's going to affect their joys, what makes them tick. All these different things play out. And then just make sure that whatever has affected them in the past consistently is making sure that you affect them in the future unless something else changed the cause. And then finally, my 5th and last tip is, particularly if you really want to be specific about wording or even languages, maybe if you want to make up your own language, that's fine. Just make sure that if you're going to use a language, that it stays consistent. Okay.
Language.
If your character says certain words, certain phrases, that has to be kept consistent. Okay, if your character is going to say one thing to certain characters, because of that relationship, that also has to stay consistent. And particularly if you're going to make up a new language, try not to keep it all over the place. Make sure it is kept consistent to create believability. So I hope this helps you guys. There are just 5 ground rules that I like to suggest on how to make sure that you have consistency within your story so it's not all over the place and the audience has a good way of following the story because they know what the expectations are, but it also sets you up to even surprise the audience. So I hope this helps you guys. I can't wait for my next episode of Think Like a Writer, and I hope you'll join me next time. Best of luck with your scripts, and see you next time.